Hello and welcome to Enlightened Empaths, your community for the spiritually awakened, where we discuss, explore, and connect with fellow empaths, healers, intuitives, and seekers. Hello, empaths. Today we're going to be talking about the mind-body connection with our guest to explore how our bodies are always talking to us. Inna Segal is a pioneer in the field of energy medicine and human consciousness and the best-selling author of The Secret Language of Your Body. Her journey from illness and personal tragedy to profound self-healing has led her to spend the past 25 years helping thousands transform pain into freedom. Through her books, healing card decks, and global teachings, she has worked with doctors, psychologists, creatives, and trauma survivors across more than 20 countries. She's also been featured on Fox, CNN, Sunrise, Channel 10, and ABC Radio, and now on our show. We're so happy to have you with us.
Thank you so much. So great.
So a lot of the things that empaths talk about is this feeling of metaphysical correlations between body pain and emotional pain. Is there ever just a situation where you trip and you stub your toe and your toe hurts, or is there always a mind-body connection?
I love that question. I think that if you trip and you stub your toe, you might, it depends how much it hurts. But you might go, what was I thinking before that? To have some awareness of maybe being disconnected from yourself or your body. But it really depends. I think that we go into deeper exploration where there's more pain and there's more reason to explore. And then, there's so many aspects where I think we just leave our life and we just go, okay, next. And that should be the way it is.
One of the things that I think is really fascinating is that we can inherit old trauma from our ancestral line, and it might not have manifested in someone else before us, but then all of a sudden someone is like, okay, I'll do it. I'll go in and deal with this trauma and grief and loss, and they're dealing with the physical ramifications. Do you find that a lot in your work, that it's not always the person's personal trauma, but it might be something that was environmental or inherited?
I do, actually. I find that quite often. And I also think what you just said is a bit of a key that can seem like, oh my God, it's so unfair. Why is it me? I'm the one who has to do all the work and no one else in the family has to. And, I think that when that occurs, you should consider yourself to be quite special, because essentially, it's not a competition. It's really about, you came into that family as the one who could handle this, as the one who had more wisdom, more capacity. Let's call it capacity. And you're opening the door to others. And we all have our karma and destiny, so to speak. And I feel like the more we can embrace it and acknowledge it, the easier it is to work with it. I had my daughter, we went to Japan, I think a year and a half ago for her 21st birthday. And she said to me, Mum, I'm so grateful that you've done the work around ancestry with our family, because you're the strongest one. And essentially, I have invited everybody in the family in some way or another to also come into this work and to explore it. But everyone has their capacity, and I like that word, to handle what was presented and to transform. And I think if it's you should be excited in a way.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. How did you understand this connection in your own life? How did you start to put those puzzle pieces together?
Well, for me, it was really about the fact that I was so extreme on the other side, in a sense where I grew up with just medicine. Like everything was medicine. Wasn't just medicine. We put doctors up, or when I say we, my mum, on huge pedestals, and whatever they said, we ran home and did. And I think for me, the case was the fact that I wasn't getting better. So, it started for me with digestive issues, and, didn't matter how many things I took, over the years, my digestive issues became worse. No matter what I did with psoriasis in terms of when I was 10 and a half, in terms of putting creams on or whatever else I was taking, I was constantly taking something from memory. It didn't really change anything. In fact, it made me feel worse. And the back pain that I had for years, which was essentially the pain that made me go, I have to go within. Again, that went on for years and years. And we went to, again, doctors, but more physiotherapists and people who were very acceptable, I'm going to say, in the medical profession. And then when I was 18, I ended up meeting my first husband, and he was very, very open-minded. He was a lot older than me, and he was open to all the alternatives, and I had had many experiences with different people. So then I started going to alternative practitioners. The issue was that I was still going with that attitude of, I don't know anything. I'm not connected with my body. Actually, my body is kind of there, but we're not friends. In fact, we're enemies, because look at what it's doing to me. It's making my life really painful and difficult. And it wasn't until I was in this chiropractor's office where he essentially said to me, Inna, your body's stuck and there's nothing I can do for you. Go home. And I went home, and I went from depression and actually not wanting to be here, because it was not long after I had a child that died, to anger and rage that came up inside of me, which he triggered, that gave me a lot of energy and a lot of capacity to reflect. And my reflection was the fact that the body had this language, but I didn't know how to decipher it. It was the puzzle, and I wasn't good at puzzles. And I was like, where are these pieces? I don't understand how to put them together. And so when I got home, the thing that changed the most was that I went, maybe, just maybe, the fact that no one can help me is one of the keys to the puzzle, because I need to figure out how to do this. And I was 20, so I didn't really know much. So I just started with touch and breath. So placing my hands on my back, breathing into the pain. And there was an insight immediately, which was, I don't listen to my body because I never breathe deeply. I'm always kind of holding my breath or breathing very shallowly. And as that realization came to me, it was like, oh, okay, let's keep exploring. I had to count backwards because there was a lot of negativity as well coming out from my mind. I have a very scientific mind, in the sense of, I need to understand everything. I need to have everything given to me in details that make sense, that link one thing to another, even though I'm bad at puzzles, right? So it's that thing of things need to make logical sense to me. And this was that gray area. So as I was counting backwards from 30, I feel like I opened the door to the gray area, so to speak. And there was a thought that came to me, which was, well, you know what? The thing that I haven't asked in terms of help for is higher help. Like, I don't know. Does it exist? Does it not exist? I grew up in a country, so I was born in Eastern Europe, where you could not believe in anything divine. Like, it was not, it was discouraged. We were told it doesn't exist and so on. However, when I had the child that died, And I was in this state of trauma, just looking at the ceiling thinking, wow, there must be something really wrong with me, because it doesn't happen to people at, I had literally just turned 20. At 20 in Australia, this might happen to people in third world countries, but I've never heard this, so there must be something very wrong with me. And so as I was thinking that, I saw, and I really know that I could not have made it up, as much as, I wasn't sure afterwards, but it just wasn't my way of thinking before. So I saw this angelic being, very feminine in nature, and she held two children, a boy and a girl. And she said to me, I know it's really hard, but everything's going to be okay, essentially, in the future. And you will have two children soon. So you're going to be okay. And I felt this peace for about 3 hours. After that, it disappeared. And so in my mind, I was like, well, it hasn't happened yet, so I don't know if I can believe it. Maybe it was a lie. But at the same time, I have had that experience. So why not ask for help with the pain that I'm going through? Because at that point, I had sciatica. I could not turn my body. It was, my whole body was inflamed. I couldn't eat food. I just wasn't functioning. I could hardly walk. I had anxiety through the roof most of the time. It was really tough and not an easy time. And my psoriasis was all over my elbows and all over my knees. And so when I asked, I actually had no expectations, but there was an immediate warmth that I felt. My eyes were closed. I could sense this golden sunlight coming into my body. And then, for whatever reason, I said, I wonder what my back really looks like. And in that moment, it was literally as if someone switched this light on, and I could see my back immediately. After the initial shock, I went, okay, let me adjust myself. Right. This is my connection to my body. This is the piece of the puzzle that hasn't been there. Why do I have this? And I really asked, not from the victim perspective, but from that place of, I'm ready. I need to know. I need to understand this. And it felt like memory meets vision meets wisdom. And so I started seeing, kind of in very visual pictures, of coming to Australia. We had lived in Italy for a while before coming to Australia. So kind of going from where I felt extremely loved and accepted and like I belong. This is where I belong, to a country that was so different from Eastern European and European way of life, and where I went, this is so foreign. I don't belong here. I don't understand these people. They don't understand me. I was bullied. I cried every day for years going to school. And I went from being a very creative, outgoing child to not even knowing who I was, to kind of being a sliver of myself and becoming very small. And and so all of this was played out in front of kind of my eyes. And as I acknowledged this and cried and kind of understood that this is what my body had carried, I felt lighter. And then the next image showed up of the next theme. And it was a connected theme, I'm going to say. But the theme was, well, what were the things that my parents went through? And one of the biggest things, and I think it's relatable to lots of people, was that they were constantly arguing about money, constantly. And they also found it very hard to adjust to new life in one way, but also easy in another. So there was a conflict as well. In one way, they felt very free to be who they were and say whatever they wanted because they couldn't where they grew up. And on the other side, they were not accepted in society, like, where you grow up, because they were different, and they just didn't know how to find their own place. And so whenever I came home, most of the time there was conflict when they were home together, I'm going to say. And that created a lot of tension. On top of that, because I struggled so much in primary school, my mom in particular said, okay, well, there is a high school, it's a private school. They're giving these massive discounts for people from Eastern Europe, and you'll make friends there. So, and it's a good school, so go. And what she didn't know or didn't realize was that in that particular school, the issue wasn't that I couldn't speak English. The issue was that I didn't come from wealth. And these people were wealthy like I have never seen wealth like that in my entire life. And so they were very unhappy about me and my friends coming, and polluting their school, which is what they said, essentially. And so now everyone who I was friends with, and I did not obviously connect this piece because you don't think like that when you're a teenager, but everyone was walking around in this self-protect mode. And I was reflecting on it maybe later on that all my friends have back pain or some kind of issue to do with their back. Several have scoliosis. Others, it's been more like just the fact that they walk around with their shoulders hunched and everything like that. And so for me, it was lower back pain, which is actually very related to everything I'm talking about: acceptance, support, finances. And so a few pieces of that puzzle, not necessarily about the finances initially, became very clear. Some of the things that I'm talking about became much more clear as I started writing about and journaling in the next few weeks. And again, as I acknowledged, I cried through some of it. The next thing that showed up was ancestry, I think, as your question, Denise. And again, there was a realization that everyone in the family has digestive issues or issues with their teeth. My grandparents went through the war, through trauma. They never talked about it because they were afraid of what would happen if they were vocal about what occurred to them. My grandmother lost all her brothers and sisters. She was one of 8, and her mother was killed in front of her to save her at 13. And all of this was pushed down and suppressed. So that made complete sense to me, especially because my grandmother called me as soon as I got out of the hospital with the stillbirth, and she said to me, I just wish it was me. And so I knew how much guilt she carried just from that conversation with her. And, in recognizing this, it was exhausting. It took hours and, quite a few hours of time to connect all of this and feel through it. And I fell asleep. And when I woke up the next day, I realized that I just felt different. I felt lighter in a different way than before. I've had plenty of experiences going to different practitioners where I had relief, but there was a sense inside of me this time that that I had more ability to hold it. I didn't know, I wasn't sure, but I thought, wow, what's never happened is me doing something and having relief. And so over the next 3 weeks, I just kept exploring and so on, and writing and journaling. By the end, I had the back pain disappeared and it's never come back. Psoriasis disappeared. My anxiety went down by a lot. And then it took years and years to work on my digestive system.
But that is incredible, because I've always referred to your work as Louise Hay on steroids, because your specificity in how you describe things. And do you feel that the being that came to you, the angelic being that was holding the babies, did you work with a guide or a team, or did you channel? Because as I mentioned before we recorded, I've shared your work with a lot of people, or someone, I'll be doing a reading and someone will say, "Oh my God, my left knee," and I'll say, "Well, let me look it up in this really cool book I have," and I'll send them the name of your book and your name, and they'll say, "How can she be so spot on with that?" So where did this information come from for you? Like, was it spontaneous? Did it channel? Because it is spot on. Or bang
No,
on,
I
because you're in
wish.
Australia.
I wish it was that easy. um, I had this realization by accident. So we're gonna say, well, nothing's an accident, but to me it was, where I realized after those 3 weeks that I could see into people's bodies. It occurred through two different experiences. One, I at that time I was still studying professional writing and editing, and I was writing a story, and my husband at the time had a friend over, and he said to me, "You know what? She's really, really good at writing. Why don't you show her some of your writing and see maybe she can give you some advice?" I knew she had studied naturopathy, so we were but that meant nothing to me anyways. We were just sitting at the computer. I was typing, and then all of a sudden, and it wasn't immediate, it was maybe after half an hour of chatting at my laptop, at my computer and typing, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I look around and I see this cartoon looking liver above her head, and I'm thinking, oh my God, now I'm going crazy. And I keep opening and closing my eyes. And she says, "What, do you have something in your eye? Like, what's going on for you? Why are you doing this?" And I said to her, "No, but can I ask you the strangest question?" And she said, "Yeah, of course." And I said to her, "Do you have liver issues?" And she said, "Well, yes, I've had them most of my life." And then her question was, "How do you know?" As soon as she acknowledged that she had liver issues, the image changed and it went to her grandfather. And so I said to her, "Did your grandfather have this?" And she said, "Yes." And then I saw that he had been in a concentration camp. I asked that. She said, "Yes." I said, "Do you get nightmares?" And she said, "Yes, constantly." And then I said this thing, which I thought, oh God, I just know nothing about the body, because I thought I was going to do acting and writing. Why would I need to learn anything about the body? So I said to her, "Well, I feel like your issues connected to your DNA and ancestry." And then I told her very personal things to do with this and her family storyline. And she didn't know this. So she called her mom. She was 25 at the time. She called her mom and she said, "Well, tell me, is this true?" And her mom said, "Oh my God, everything you said is spot on." And then we just sat there staring, and she said, "Oh, in the last, whatever it was, hour, I've learned more about my life and my health than in the last 25 years. Thank you." And I remember just kind of getting that feeling of, wow, that is, where does this come from? Was it from an angel? No, I didn't hear a voice in that sense. I have heard the voice of this angelic being several times in different moments in my life. I've studied a lot of Rudolf Steiner's work, so I believe deeply that we do have a guardian angel that holds the threads of our karma and can assist us. So there's definitely a possibility that there's been a lot of help, I'm going to say. But essentially, the way that I wrote the book was based on years and years of tuning into people and particular health conditions. Because what you'll find is that not every health condition is there. Not that the publisher would allow me to write a book that big with that, many conditions. But essentially, sometimes people come to me and they go, "Well, why didn't you put this condition or that?" And the reason is because I did not work with people who had those conditions. So I only put into the book what I understood and what, came to me through essentially scanning people's bodies, their energy fields, tuning in, asking countless questions, keeping a lot of notes because I'm come from that background of journalist, writer, and then seeing all the connections and putting them together. And I want to say, in terms of Louise Hay, I just think that she was brilliant in terms of opening the door. But the difference that we have, and I think it is with a lot of people who wrote books probably after me, or there was a few before, is that majority did not have the same capacity. So they found or collated the information from other people. Whereas for me, I remember looking at Louise's book a couple of times, maybe 2 or 3 times when I was writing my book, just to kind of see what she wrote, about a particular topic. And then I remember thinking that doesn't help me. This doesn't work for me, because then I end up being influenced rather than actually doing what I can do, which is tuning into people. And, and the big thing for me was also that I felt that when, Wayne Dyer and Louise Hay and all of the people kind of of that generation started in the 70s, people were very open to, like, feel like their soul was different in a sense of you could say several affirmations and have a big shift and a big change, and you could breathe and do, a few affirmations. But by the time I was working with people, I feel like that level of sensitivity somehow went into, like, we need a lot more. We need to go through a lot more layers and deeper, because, in terms of level of consciousness, we understood so much more by that stage. And we understood, so much more about where the body holds things. Whereas, when Louise put her book out, I think it was right at the beginning of that understanding. And so I feel like, in general, the more we understand, the more complex things become and deeper, or we have a deeper understanding, but we simplify maybe in how we share it.
Has your work shown you that color therapy and sound therapies help just as much as visualization and the energy scan and the other techniques you talk about?
Absolutely, 100%. So, color to me works on the astral body, which is connected to the mental and the emotional bodies and holds, aspects of those within itself. So whenever we work with color, and color works directly on pain and pain receptors, so it can make us feel, it can help us, I should say, release pain. At the same time, it can give us an ability to expand our feeling palette. So feelings that maybe we haven't allowed ourselves to explore or express can be embraced through the various colors and and energies and vibrations. Now, when it comes to music, when I'm teaching, especially teaching workshops, and whenever there is a process, I don't do any processes without music. And very often what I'll do is I'll have beautiful music that potentially has certain notes and vibrations that, whether it connects to a chakra or opens up new possibilities, or is connected to high vibrational energy, to in the moments where people really need to connect emotionally, I will use songs from artists that I love or artists that I've connected with personally, and feel like, again, what they're saying comes from a really transformational place, and I'll bring their music and their work into it so that people can go into a much deeper feeling state than they would without that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Was it difficult because both hemispheres light up? You're very intuitive, you're very connected, you're very spiritual, equally, though, very articulate, very science-based. And what I'm finding lately, talking with a lot of people that are still in traditional medicine, is they're feeling this very strong intrinsic draw towards bringing these aspects into their practice or more alternative treatments. And you've been doing this for a while now. This isn't, fresh out of the gate. Do you feel that the world is more ready for your book now than when you first published it? And that it's because I think that it's cutting edge now, in more people are waking up to realizing they have more control over their mind, body, spirit.
I do think that. And I think it's quite interesting because I was 26 when I was writing the book. So, and, I just turned 46. So I wrote it exactly 20 years ago. And at that time, there was a lot of people that I felt, for them, it was a bit of a stretch. But I wanted to, my vision from the beginning was, how do I influence medicine? And it's quite interesting because a lot of people associated me more with Caroline Myss than even Louise Hay, mainly because she has more of the abilities that I have, or I have more what she has. And so and there's a lot of people that call themselves medical intuitive, and I'm very against this, to be honest, because I think that you need to be a medical doctor to call yourself that, who develops their capacity, and there have been several as well. That makes sense to me, but essentially we're not medically trained, so we should not be calling ourselves that. And I feel like words are really important. Language is so important, for it to be aligned and correct, because everything we say and think has an impact on our body. So what I feel is that, yes, we need to move medicine and alternative medicine that has been proven, as opposed to somebody that does a 2-day workshop and calls themselves a healer, right? I cannot stand that. And so we need, and this is where I think I was so inspired by Rudolf Steiner's work, because he was a clairvoyant but a scientist, and he took medicine and he brought alternative understandings and views to it, and we're talking 100 years ago, but what he talked about is only being discovered right now, 100 years later. And on top of that, he spoke about subtle bodies in a very, very detailed way that medicine tends to ignore. And I think that's the biggest issue, because what they can't do is they can't describe, let's say somebody had an amputation of their leg. They cannot tell you why the person still feels like they have the leg and why the person still feels the pain in their leg. So they don't understand that, okay, they don't have the physical leg, but they have the etheric leg. And on top of that, that etheric leg is still experiencing the astral impact of emotion that is being pressed into it. And we are energetic, spiritual, emotional, mental, soul, spirit beings as well, as well as physical. And we need to understand those, because without it, we don't understand the simplest things. Like, for instance, the etheric body affects your digestive system. And what it does is it makes sure that when it's working correctly, that it helps you to digest food without the smell of rotten food, right? Because the food essentially, as you're putting it into your body, it needs to digest or it rots. So when somebody dies, within a very short period of time, there is a smell of the body rotting because the etheric body has gone. And they say they can even, they'll say, okay, it's the soul, just because they generalize everything and don't understand much in terms of real, like, different aspects of healing. I'm all for surgery when people need it, but essentially there's very little real understanding in medicine of what causes anything. So when the etheric body goes, they say, oh, the physical body's a little bit lighter, but they don't know what it is that we're talking about, and they don't understand, well, why is the body, and I don't know if you've ever seen people die, but I know when I have seen them, within moments, the body becomes a bag. It's like it loses its shape, right? Unless somebody kind of puts it's quite fascinating to watch. And the etheric body is what gives you the shape, what allows you to, it's like an architect of the physical body. So there's just so much lack of understanding. And so everything becomes physical. My dream is to work with as many, I'll say, medical professionals as I can. I've had more nurses in my practice from when I first started to teaching than I've had anybody who's attended my courses. I'm going to say, lots of psychologists, lots of counselors, not as many doctors, but when I wrote the book, it was very, very important for me to contact as many doctors as I could who were open-minded at that stage to this type of work. And this is where I definitely had angelic help, and I had a lot of amazing feedback.
That's fantastic. Wow. Can you share? I just love listening to your stories. Do you have a story of a client you had or a student that really sticks out with you in terms of how the techniques in your book help people to heal on all the different layers of their energy?
Oh, so many people. Well, one of my students who actually became one of my practitioners regrew bone gristle inside of her knees because she was told that she wasn't going to be able to walk and or dance. She was a professional dancer, and she started using, I think, the processes in the book, and then she started coming to various workshops and using very advanced healing techniques. And she also had, from memory, I think there was something that was very, very wrong with her heart, where she was told that she would have to have a pacemaker in her heart, and she was able to use the various techniques to turn that around. She came from a family that everybody in, I think it was in their 50s to very early 60s, ended up with Alzheimer's, and she's 67 at the moment, and she doesn't have anything like that. So she was one of the people. I mean, there's been so many. I think the funny story that I have was with this lady who, she would have been in her 60s when I met her in France. And for 2 years, she saw me teach because there was a bookshop and then there was this healing center downstairs. So I would have to walk through the bookshop to go to the healing center. And she was helping out in the bookshop. So she would look at me, but it was this very skeptical kind of, this very skeptical way, because I was pretty young when I was going to Paris and to teach. And then one day, 2 years later, I see her sitting in the audience and at the front. And I said to her, I thought that you were very skeptical and you didn't believe in what I did. And she said, well, I didn't, but I've been observing you for the last 2 years. And when people walk downstairs, they look like, they look sad and they look heavy and unhappy and unhealthy. And when they come out, they look like they've had a facelift. So I'm here for my facelift. Now, what I didn't know at the time was that she was preparing for surgery. So she had an issue with her ankle that she needed surgery on. I didn't know this, but during the course, I connected to her and I kind of said, well, I feel like you have a lot of issues around self-confidence, your heart. So to her, do you have a challenge with a relationship with somebody in your family, your dad, for instance? And she said something like, well, yeah, I don't believe in myself, and my dad and I haven't spoken for 20 years. So we did a lot of healing on her heart. There was nothing on her ankle, I'm going to say. We did not focus on her ankle at all. On her heart and on her clearing the energy, the stuck energy between her and her dad. Within a couple of days, her dad called her and apologized. This is after 20 years of no contact. This has happened so many times. And then I got a phone call from the lady who she was working for. And she said to me, oh, have you heard about the miracle healing? And I was like, no, what's the miracle healing? And she said, well, within a short period of time of you doing that healing on her heart, her ankle spontaneously healed and she didn't need surgery.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. Is it not, Denise?
It is amazing. And one of the things that I love is that you just put perfectly into words. So many times we've talked to practitioners or people who do energy scans or healing, and someone will come in and say, oh, it's my left shoulder. And they're immediately drawn to their right hip. And they'll say, well, let's go here first, because that's where the energy is clogged up. In your book, you always, what I respect greatly is that you put possible contributing factors. You don't make it definitive. And I agree with you 100% as far as the power of words. And I mean, I'm not quite as kind. You're saying don't take a 2-day workshop and call yourself something. I think that there's a lot of detrimental stuff happening right now because people are making themselves experts. And that's a story for another day. But then with the remedy part, so you can look through your book and you can find a specific thing where the remedies are all very specific, but one correlation between all of them is that you have people clear. You use the word clear very strongly, but also refer to divine healing intelligence. So do you feel like you connected with a higher source to bring through those remedies?
It was a combination, I'm going to say, of lots and lots and lots of research and speaking to lots of practitioners of different modalities where I was being inspired, I was really inspired by reflexology, for instance. And so I was invited countless times to speak to people who were learning reflexology or pressure point therapy or people who were learning kinesiology. So even before I wrote the book, I'm going to say, so I was kind of delving into those, as well as, I spent so many years going to yoga classes for everything you can imagine. And so I was looking for what is easy to do. Like, what are the easy, like everybody can press a point, right, on their hand or hold a position in terms of their hands, or, everybody can breathe into a particular part of their body. So I was looking at those types of modalities to combine with everything that I thought somebody had. So I kind of went, what can we do? We can think, okay, I'm going to ask questions that work on thinking, and I'm going to do a process, to do with deleting, and releasing particular thought patterns. And I'm going to include things that I learned, like I remember I spent quite a bit of time learning from John DiMartini when I was about 22. And he spoke about positive and negative charge and how that affects us in our life. So I went, well, that makes sense. I'd want to put that into a process because people understand negative charge reaction. Like we're basically reacting to something that is difficult for us to work with and understand. But people don't understand positive charge. And to me, positive charge is what we just spoke about, Denise, is thinking that you can become a practitioner after 2 days of learning something, or wanting instant healing without doing anything, and not listening, not understanding that someone cannot fix you magically with a magic wand. You have to participate in this experience to some degree or another, ideally to a big degree. And and so I was looking at how do I make things that a child can do, but at the same time uses a thinking, a feeling, a hearing, in different processes. The word clear for me was very much to do with the nervous system. So what I realized very early on was that if somebody's nervous system was blocked, meaning they were in fight or flight or freeze response, then they would usually say, I'm not feeling anything when I'm doing processes, when I'm connecting to my body, it's numb. So the word clear for me was kind of like, when I was writing it, I was putting a lot of energy into it myself. So it was kind of like this, and I even describe it as taking a vacuum cleaner, right? And cleaning out all of those blockages, especially through the nervous system, which is also a communication system. It communicates with every part of the body, so that the more clearer it was, the more space we had for one transformation and for reconnection inside of the body. And so I thought about it in all sorts of different ways of how to use psychological kind of, I guess, processes to change your thinking and your mind, as well as feelings, as well as using color, as well as movement in quite a few of them, or taking steps forward. It was kind of like, how do we use all of our body to make this change?
Wow. Can you leave us with an exercise that listeners can do to kind of get started with connecting with their energy in this way?
Absolutely. I did, for whatever reason, I feel like I need to share this. This story just came up very strongly for me in terms of sharing as well when you asked about it first. So there was a young woman that came to one of the workshops, and she came on crutches. She could not, so she had to be actually brought, she had crutches, I'm going to say, to help her get up, but she was brought in into this particular course, and her she couldn't really walk at that point when she was brought in. And when I was kind of going around in this particular group and tuning into people, and when I came to her, she kept talking about her legs, but what I saw was her kind of root chakra, reproductive system, sacral. And again, it goes back, Denise, to how this can affect us in terms of ancestry. It became very clear that her family had gone through enormous amount of trauma through the war, and that she absorbed this, right? And somehow, as she was growing up, she was absorbing it from a place of guilt that children do, because when children are really young, they absorb something we call soul fragments. So this soul energy that hasn't been processed, that has some kind of trauma in it. And when, she absorbed this, and it showed up in her legs, like she couldn't walk. And as, we connected and started exploring, I found a lot of things that was like literally images of war and trauma that were not her own, playing out inside of her reproductive system. and affecting that system as well as her legs. And so we worked on this through different processes, different ways for about 3 days. And then I remember showing up to this course, showing up early, and I saw her crutches on the floor, but she wasn't there. And I was walking around looking for her and just going like, this is strange. Where is she? And then 5-10 minutes later, I see her walking, towards where all her stuff was. And I just, I just look at her and I'm like, what happened? And she said, well, in the last 3 days, as all of this released, because again, legs are about moving forward and hers were stuck. And she said, as I released all the stuff that I was carrying in the back, lower back, in the legs, in my reproductive system, I feel so much lighter. And then I just tried to walk and I can walk. And it was just, again, just seeing what is possible. I've seen a lady much older in a very different workshop many years later grow 6 centimeters after doing work with, like, we were working to do with the womb to do with her mother, and what she absorbed from her mother, including the womb. It was just absolutely incredible. What we do not have any clue what the body is really capable of. What I'm going to say in terms of healing, there's many aspects of healing. I feel like even in medicine, people have to study for 7 years just to be, in Australia, to be a general doctor. And then they want to be a surgeon or so on. They have to specialize, and that takes many more years. Well, I can tell you, I've been studying healing for 25 years and I still feel like, oh my God, there is so much more to put together and discover. And I feel like some of the complexity, like the threads that I've learned and come up with are up there with some of the amazing discoveries, that we've had. So it is, there's the beginning journey. And I'm saying this because what we're about to share is the beginning of the beginning, right? Because that's where we have to start. And, there's a few things that I want to say to people getting onto the journey. Firstly, you have to understand that it doesn't happen instantaneously. It happens through stages. And I am of the belief that the slower it is, the more likely it is to hold, as opposed to instant healings and band-aid solutions. Now, I've shared a few stories where it seems like it happened very quickly, but I can tell you that, I spent years and years going to practitioners and getting my nervous system into a place of where I could transform, where I could even connect those pieces of the puzzle together. The young girl that I just mentioned who came to my workshop had gone to countless practitioners, and even though it didn't seem like anything was working, there was a stage of preparation until we got to the place of specificity, of specifically working things, but there was still preparation because she had to connect to what I was seeing, and then explore it and take it deeper herself during the processes that I was teaching. And so I can say that, again, the lady who grew 6 centimeters was a kinesiologist for 20 years herself, and did countless courses. So don't feel like it needs to happen instantaneously. And also preparation is key. Rather than jumping into processes straight away, including in my book, The Secret Language of Your Body. I mean, please, please, please read the section that explains the processes, and repeat the processes over and over again. It's not a one-off thing. I cannot tell you how many emails I've received from people saying, I've done this process 2 times and it didn't work for me. And I'm like, how many years did it take for you to have this condition for this to work, right? So the first thing is definitely preparation, and it's giving yourself permission to go to places that are uncomfortable, places that you may not have gone to before, with that awareness. And this is where I feel guidance is so important, and the right teachers, where I usually, when I'm teaching somebody, really work with strengthening their sense of self. We never just go into a trauma directly. And, we work with people becoming, and I keep kind of pointing to my solar plexus because that's where that area is. Like, you do have to be strong enough to face certain things. So actually taking the time and realizing the body will show you things through layers is very, very important. The preparation that I talk about, especially initially for the nervous system, is to stand rather than sitting or lying down. When you lie down, what happens is that sense of self becomes weakened because your astral body starts to go, ooh, I'm going to astral travel to sleep. And so you don't have all of yourself there. When you're sitting, if I want to work on my solar plexus, on my digestive system, on my reproductive system, it's a lot harder because I'm squashing it. And so many of my emotions are stored in these parts of like my body, right? And also when I'm trying to do it, to change and to move forward. And I always say to people, you must include your thinking, your feeling area, and your will, which is around your sacral and the hip area. So when you stand, you align a lot more with yourself, even though it can be a little bit less comfortable. So I get people to stand and to scan their body, in particular looking for areas that either have pain or numbness. And as we do that, as we're breathing into, and we need to breathe into our body, I ask people to place their hands on that part of the body that you want to connect with and get insights from and understand better. And as you breathe into that part of your body, I ask people to focus directly on what does the sensation feel like, as opposed to jumping straight into the emotion, because most people are very confused about emotions in general and don't know how to really access them easily. And so by working with the sensation, is it hot, is it cold, is it sharp, is it dull, heavy, what does it feel like as a sensation first, we start to clear some pathways as well in terms of the nervous system. I also ask people to do a particular breathing sequence, which is breathing through your nose and breathing out through your mouth with slightly pursed lips in a very slow way, so that you can start to go, this is how I'm meant to breathe, to start to feel into my body, but also to calm the nervous system down. And then I'll ask them to go, okay, so once we're aware of sensations, what is the shape? What is the color that we're looking at? And I'll often say, is this a healthy color? Because if it's not, it's telling us a whole story. And I'll say, what would be a healthy color? And then we might go, okay, so if there was a belief or several that was stored inside of this color and inside of the shape and sensation, what would that belief be? And is there anything underneath it? And we start with acknowledging it. And then we might go, is this belief connected to a particular emotion or set of emotions? And so what I always try and do is get people, especially when they're newer to this work, to become really aware of the language of the body, because that's what it is, right? And then I'll say, okay, if you can visualize or imagine or just sense, or use your hands, we're going to work with the purple flame. Again, I talk about it a lot in my book. And that flame is going to be transformational And we can even put some intention into it for how you want this to transform. And I prefer the word transformation even to the word to release or letting go. So we let go in a sense, but then we go, how do we transform this? What do we learn from this? How do we change our point of view and perspective that we've had? So that's a constant question that I have. So I might say, okay, what's the point of view that you have now, and how did it come to that? And is this a healthy point of view? And once we've kind of layered it, then we start to go, okay, now I want you to use your physical hands, not just imagine this, but use your physical hands to take out the layers of this energy that now you're aware of, and place it into the purple flame with that intention of we're transforming this. And the question is, what is the perspective that is healing, that we are transforming this into, that can help you move forward as opposed to being stuck? So we go through these layers, and then I ask people to journal and understand a little bit more about themselves. So this is kind of that preparation to then go into the deeper work of diseases or pain or trauma.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. I hope everyone checks out the book, The Secret Language of Your Body, because it's something we all need to know and recognize and to empower ourselves with. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. We really, really appreciate it. We're going to link people to your website in the show notes, but she also has some great instructional videos on YouTube too, so check her out. And thank you guys for listening. Did you want to add anything, Denise?
No, thank you. This has been lovely and very informative. I know you helped a lot of people today. So thank you.
Yes.
If
And
I can add one more thing,
yes.
just to encourage people. Over the last few years, I've been doing masterclasses / mini workshops, including and starting from the secret language of your body. And if people go to my website, innasegal.com, they will see a page on masterclasses, and there are several there. There's ones for beginning the journey, and then there's ones called Awaken the Healer Within for going deep into exploring chakras, timelines, understanding more about archetypes and how everything that's happened to us affects us. And there's several processes that people can do. And I get constant feedback from people saying, I didn't realize how powerful the processes are in these free masterclasses, but they won't be free forever. So I really encourage people to take the leap and start looking within, because essentially you are your own healer.
Thank you.
That's perfect. Thank you, everyone, for listening as well. Have a great week, and remember to show up, do great work, and share your light.